Good morning, Squamish, and welcome to the public
It's like a radio show.
Corporate Services Standing Committee. You can tell what kind of movies I like. For March 28th, 2017, and I'd like to acknowledge this meeting is being held on my unclaimed traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. We have an agenda this morning. So we're moving for the adoption of the agenda. Councillor Pryor, second Councillor Elliott. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. By that step, we don't have to go away. We can stay. So committee minutes, there are one set of minutes to approve, the February 28, 2017 Public Services Standing Committee minutes. So move to approve those minutes, moved by the Mayor, seconded by Councillor Pryor. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Is there any business arising from those minutes?
I had some.
Councillor Elijah.
I sent some feedback to corporate services about, legislative services about just an omission in the minutes from last time. And they were going to get back to me today. And that's when we were talking about the bus stop shelters last time. And I had requested that we reconsider the size of the one near Brackendale Elementary and Don Ross School because it would be full of students, and they proposed a smaller one, and that wasn't captured in the minutes. And so I asked them to capture it.
So when you adopt the minutes, you need to amend to include, correct? To include.
Okay.
Should we get a motion to that?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
When you,
No, sorry, to the effect of the bus shelters, like have actual direction from council to do that versus.
No,
writing
I see what you're
it.
saying.
Like an actual motion, Councillor Elliott for.
So approve the minutes first, and then the motion to expand the size of the bus shelters.
and then that will go to council for approval.
So on the minutes as they're presently formatted, Mayor.
I believe Councillor Elliott was suggesting that we do add in, a suggestion was in the minute bullets, a suggestion was made to expand the size of the, so it's actually in the minutes, and then we can do a follow-up motion.
And the staff are going to get it back.
So when you adopt the minutes, you say as corrected
Yeah,
to
just want to make
include.
sure.
No, okay. Let's do it that way. Did you follow that, Terry?
Yes, I did.
So we're moving the approval of the minutes with that amendment to include the reference to the bus shelter. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Delegations. Ms. Craig.
And then
Oh,
I think the next step would be for Councillor Elliott to put forward a motion that staff actually look into it. So,
Okay.
you do like it to be action, is that what your goal, ultimate goal?
Yeah, that's why I wanted to do the minutes.
Wait,
If we need a separate motion.
You need a motion for
Okay.
staff.
Technically,
So
you
make a
need a
motion that staff reconsider the size of the bus shelter currently proposed at Don Ross, on Government Road at Don Ross and Brackendale Elementary.
and this would be a recommendation to council.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a seconder? Councilor Pryor? Any further comment? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you. So, delegations and petitions. Ms. Craig, floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. I'm here to present Search and Rescue Squamish. We have BJ Shute, who is the president, and Tennessee Trent, who's the vice president, and they're here today to just kind of give an overview of what they have done in 2016. Go ahead.
Thanks, Alexis. Thanks, guys. Again, for those of you who don't know me, my name is BJ Shute. I'm the president of Squamish SAR, and to my right here is Tennessee Trent, the vice president of Squamish SAR. We're also, Tennessee and I are also SAR managers, so we run some of the calls that happen as well as the business of the society. So 2016 was a busy year for Squamish SAR. It was probably our busiest year call-wise. We broke down some stats here for you guys, which I know you kind of love, but we're not really sure how else to present it. So if you could just indulge us for a few minutes. Year in review, obviously an increase in the call volume. We did, and actually we just signed the papers now. We've replaced a 1988 GMC truck that was donated, I believe, by the district some time ago to Squamish SAR. It's sort of long past its sort of expiry date, and the age-wise, but more practicality-wise, Still a pretty good truck. Yeah. And what we've done is we've bought a big enclosed trailer, so all of our water gear, which is worth quite a bit of money and whatnot, can just be housed in the trailer, and we can just hook that trailer up either to one of the SAR vehicles or one of the members' vehicles to respond. So We haven't used it yet, but I think we will now that the weather's, well, today's a bad example, starting to change. And we're pretty excited to see how this idea works. 2016 and in 2017, we focused a lot on member development and how we can sort of provide training and different avenues of training to our team members. We've come into, as I'm sure you know, some extra money from the provincial government to be spent over, well, at the time we wrote this presentation, it was over 2 years, but you may have seen, yes, was it
Sunday was announced.
Sunday was announced an additional sum of money for SAR in the province by the provincial government. We don't know exactly how that's going to unfold for our team, but certainly there's been a significant amount of money invested by the province. So that's going to help again with our focus is to how do we develop our members and how do we train them and possibly how do we outfit them better. We do have a plan that we're working on with Alexis to hopefully do some improvements near the south end of the field at Stormwest Elementary School. And we budgeted some of that money for those projects as well. Yeah, one of the big things that we are trying to do now is we've identified that paying for training is fairly cumbersome for our members. So if there's a way that we as an organization can front load that money to the members, we're trying to do that. And the two areas that we recognize are members' first aid tickets, which can be costly for them, and also the avalanche training. Both of those are mandatory for us, and both of those are sort of easy for us to find courses and have members register for them. So that's why we've gone with that. And going forward, we're, as you know, last 2 years ago when we developed the agreement with the district, one of the things that we as an organization took on was funding for our vehicles and vehicle replacements. So we know now that, we knew then, but now we're trying to figure out how is it that we invest in the future with somewhat less reliance on yearly provincial gaming funds that we can now save to replace potentially our boat and snowmobiles and our vehicles. It's been very difficult for us financially to do that, given the fact that we're not really able to carry money over on a yearly basis, which we rely on gaming. So we've got an opportunity to do that. And also some investment, and I believe it's Camilla that we're working with, to do some improvements around our compound or our base that the district owns as well. Sort of a big thing that's not probably relevant to you guys, but we're in the process of obtaining our own medical director, which there's a whole lot of legal reasons behind that, but one of our primary focuses or responsibilities has historically been medical responses, and by having an in-house, for lack of a better word, an in-house doctor, it opens up what it is our members are allowed to do and how we can do it in the training behind them. So we think there's a really great opportunity to increase our medical response. Operationally, like you said, 2016 was our busiest year. We did 100 call-outs. 86 of those were responses, and 14 of them were calls where we were called and they were non-events. So it could be anything from the fact that the police, for example, may have found the missing person, or it could have been a call in error or a call that was for another SAR team, stuff like that we didn't actually respond to, but the team did respond 86 times last year, which is a lot for a volunteer organization. Tennessee's actually taken this on, but one of our sort of commitments to our members this year at our AGM was to figure out a way to better engage the general membership as to how the board is running. And in that spirit, we sent out a survey to our membership, and it was a relatively short survey, but a first one to gauge some feedback on the safety around the team, team development, as well as self-development and training. So we're in the process now of sort of gathering that information and seeing if there's any fresh ideas or if there's a way that our membership wants the board to take this team or to do things differently. So that's kind of a little bit of an in-house thing, but it's sort of exciting for us to be able to do that. This is just a call summary of, I think it goes back to 2007. And there's no surprise, our team's just been getting busier and busier. And I think the next slide, I need to apologize for, there's a bit of a formatting error, and we forgot 2016, or it got left off the slide somehow, but nonetheless, the reflection is very similar. To date, as of, I think it was last Sunday, so a week ago, we've done 10 calls this year, which is kind of on par for an average winter for us. We typically do 1 or 2 calls per month in the wintertime. And this year sort of no exception. We're trending very similar. We expect April, May, June, etc. for the ladder to start climbing there for us and starting to become more busy. Again, just some statistics of what it is we do. We have the province actually has a list of criteria as to how we break down our types of calls. So our GSAR call is a non-specialty, for lack of a better word, where our team can go out and perform somebody who's lost on the chief, for example, call. We have rope rescue calls, winter response, mountain water calls, and new this year we added mutual aid calls. So any team in the province can call for assistance from Squamish SAR, and if we're available and we have specialty resources, which is typically why they would do that, we would be able to send members to those calls as well. Again, no real surprise here for anyone who's followed our team, but we're predominantly a rescue team, and we do very few searches, like traditional searches. Most of the calls that we do involve somebody who's been injured or is stranded and requires some sort of technical rescue. CDFL is kind of a fancy word for long lines, when we hang somebody under the helicopter, really, for the simplest of version. We do, on average, 13 of these responses a year. This goes back district-wise. The initial HETS gear was provided by the district. We've since updated most of that and in the process of actually buying an entire new kit for our team. That's due to some ongoing kind of regulation changes throughout the country and how HETS is governed, which is by Transport Canada. So it's a fairly significant investment for our team, but it's certainly a worthy investment. So much so that we trained 6 or 5.
I think it was 4 new members.
4 new members
last fall.
Last fall.
The first non-JI sponsored CDFL training event in the province, developed mostly by the Whistler SAR team. New curriculum, so really kind of good training program that'll be useful throughout the province.
Oh,
Sorry, the
JI,
Justice Institute?
Yeah, Justice Institute. So
Yeah.
a lot of our training is done provincially, and most of the provincial training is hosted through the Justice Institute of BC. Oftentimes we have some leeway there, like for example, first aid, we can send people to any provider that's out there. Rope is going that way, and the long line, the HETS has now gone that way too, where there's been curriculum development by SAR members throughout the province and by other providers throughout the province that's available. So although there's sort of 2 sides to it, we don't know how it's all going to unfold. It has opened up the ability for us to kind of do in-house training. We can hire people to come in that are not necessarily from them.
And then sorry about the acronym. So CDFL is Class D fixed line, which is the aviation terminology used by Transport Canada and air carriers. It's all aviation equipment, so regulated that way. And then HETS is Human External Transport System. They're the same thing. Sorry about that.
Outside
Thank you
the
for that.
lanes of
That's right. Yeah.
One of the things about this slide is I think we get a lot of questions, and a lot of people sort of assume that every one of our rescues is kind of involving a helicopter or somebody that's being long line from the helicopter. And if you look, we did that 16 out of 100 times, so it's a very small proportion. But there's some calls we simply wouldn't be able to perform without this tool, and there's other calls that we wouldn't be able to perform as efficiently or as safely without this tool as well. So it's something that it seems very sort of flashy and dramatic, but it's a very useful tool that our team uses very, very successfully. One of the things that we left off here that occurred to me when we were talking a few slides back is that Squamish SAR has recently done an intake, and we've just taken on 14 new members. So some of those 3 of those members actually have come from other teams, which is great because they bring all the training and the support from those other teams. And the remaining of them we're training ourselves in-house. And we're about halfway through that process, and we hope to have this new batch of members ready to be out in the field. Our goal is the May long weekend, because typically that's the sort of start of our busy season. So we're kind of on track for that. It might be, you know, June 1st or something like that, but it's pretty exciting for us to have these new people.
Before you leave that slide,
Go ahead.
where do you get the helicopter from?
We rent it from Blackcomb, for lack of a better
And
term.
is,
Yeah.
and are there some helicopter operators that are, or pilots that are
Yes. So
trained
it's,
for this particular thing?
yeah, it's very specific. So we have, right now we have the equipment that we can use 2 of the configurations from the helicopters. And there's, I don't know how many pilots Blackcomb employs that are certified to do this, but we have to have the right helicopter and the right pilot in order to do this. And if we can't, we have the option to go to other helicopter providers. That we haven't had to do that in a number of years.
We also, it's required that we have an MOU with the air carrier, between our team and the air carrier, and which we've just updated again for 2017 in the last few weeks. And so the air carrier inspects all of our gear regularly, and those are all required by Transport Canada, the aviation rules, so that we keep records. We've done that in the past, but we've sort of passed that off to the air carrier because it seems more appropriate that paid professionals do that work rather than a bunch of volunteers after a long task.
And how is that funded? Is it
Province.
by the province
Province
on a
funds.
per call basis, sort of like emergency services?
Yeah, no, it's funded, so the way it would work is the SAR manager on duty would request from the province an authorization to use the HETs, and what that does is that opens the funding model. So then from there, Blackcomb bills the province for the time that it's required. And then the province reimburses Squamish SAR for the use of our gear.
Okay.
Yeah, your graph here shows quite a jump in 2013, particularly 2014, 2015, 2016. Is that correlatable to the gondola, or is there something else driving that?
It correlates mostly, we've never been able to pinpoint exactly what it is, but it correlates to the jump in our call volume. So if you go back, if we were to go back to the slides, our call volume started to climb incredibly up around 2012, 2013. So just by nature, all of the different disciplines that we use have climbed as well.
Yeah.
So although we do a number of responses at the gondola, we've never been able to say definitively, and frankly, I don't even know that we would want to, that the gondola was a cause of the increase in calls. We were going up towards 100 calls prior to the gondola opening.
It's helpful from us from a decision-making point of view, so we understand the full impacts of
Mhm.
developments sort of.
The one thing I know for certain in being in emergency services as my professional job as well is anytime you put more people in a certain area, more things happen and the services are required. So, you know, anytime that there's a large infrastructure where it's going to draw massive crowds, that you know, the number of calls are going to go up regardless of what the emergency service is.
Did you plot them out on a map?
We've tried. So
I mean, this is just HETS, but you plot.
our call volume,
Yeah.
not in any sort of detail. We have stats going back, and we actually just went back and reviewed 10 years of our statistics to see. But we know that the majority of our calls are on weekends and are in and around the Chief/Gondola area. Those places that are really easy for people to get to.
And I think HETS is a technical terrain access tool. And, if you look at that spike, I think it correlates to the massive increase in public recreation in general and more people going more places, whether it's gnarly mountain bike trails or up in the mountains or out back of the gondola or speed winging or whatever else. All of those things are reflected in that data too, I think.
It's actually a good idea. We should have a big map at the hall.
A map would be great. We can even just do pins or something.
Yeah.
I suspect our GIS could help with that. I
Sure,
don't know if
that'd
it's
be
data
awesome.
points we
Yeah.
need
Yeah.
from it.
Yeah. We actually started a couple of years ago with the SAR managers. We have a report that we write after each call out that gets sent to the province, and most of that is just to account for the money that was spent. But we started adding to it a whole bunch of statistics, like the age range of people, the type of the injury, where they were, and all that stuff. And I think, to be truthful, it just became kind of overbearing
Yeah,
when
no,
it's-
it does get.
we're writing so many reports already, so, yeah, that'd be great if we could do that, would be cool. So operationally, that's kind of the crux of that. Tennessee was gonna walk through some of the more administrative.
The really
stuff.
exciting stuff. Yeah. Won't bore you for too long. We have, really the Squamish Search and Rescue Society, who, the District of Squamish has signed an agreement with and who we're here representing, isn't an operational organization. The society really manages resources on behalf of the SAR team. So the property, the money coming in and out, and the equipment. As well as a website. So we have a website that we operate. I have no idea how many hits it gets, some, not tons. We have a newsletter which goes out, weekly, if not more frequently, to our membership. There's always training or other events going on that we're reminding our membership about. So the newsletter's been really effective in doing that. We have a Twitter account. I am not on Twitter, I don't tweet, but somebody on our team does, and apparently we have 1,600 followers, so that's great. It's good for sort of name recognition, as well as an Instagram account. Again, that's not me. We have a prevention team that's very active in the community. They work a lot, I think, with Alexis. They work in all the schools. Last year they did multiple presentations, educating mostly kids, and over 2,800 people in total, adults too, in Adventure Smart. So the society has a mandate for operational preparedness, but also for prevention. And the hope is that through education we can reduce the need for our services. We don't see that happening, but I think it's still a good goal and something that we're working towards. So yeah, prevention, Adventure Smart team. We go to the next slide there.
They do trailhead days as well.
Yeah, Trailhead Days at the Chief. We had in January, it was the Avalanche Awareness Days through Avalanche Canada, and our Adventure Smart team was up at Elfin Lakes and stuff like that. So in 2016, we did the test, the last final test of metal, which Squamish SAR was proud to be a part of for, I think, the duration of that 21-year event. We also did the Santa Parade, and we did the Kids Triathlon last year. There was one other event which didn't really work out great for us, with the cyclocross event in 2016. And one of the reasons is we're stretched as an organization. We have about 60 members. BJ said we're taking on new members, but with 100 tasks, well over 100 training events in a year. Literally, I have SAR, not counting this, where I should be at work, I have SAR 3 nights this weekend, Saturday, for training, right? And most of our members we're in this sort of preparation for summer sort of phase right now. And so we like to be able to support the community. We think the work that we do does that. And we like to support events, but we have to be very judicious and not take on more than we can actually manage. And so the cyclocross event, unfortunately, was one of the events where we probably shouldn't have taken it on. So this year we've taken on 3, and 3 that we consistently in the past been able to support. The Kids Triathlon is a great event. The Santa Parade, and you guys all know it, it's also a great event, and we're happy to be part of that one. And then the SPOCUS, I'm not sure if I'm saying the word right, 50, which is on the same weekend as the test. They approached us and requested our services similar to what we gave for the test of metal, and we're gonna try that and see how it goes. And if it goes well, they are good training opportunities. They're fully operational, lots of radio communications, all kinds of logistics, and often first aid to do too. So they're good training events, but guaranteed the weekend of the test or SPOCUS, there'll be 3 or 4 SAR calls too. So it's just tricky to manage all that stuff. Right? We can go to the next slide. Oh, so BJ talked a bit about this. I guess one thing that BJ didn't mention is that we did acquire in 2016 a new water trailer to operational readiness for our water team. It's got dry suits and a bunch of other equipment in there, and a dryer and a generator. 2015, we replaced the 1988 GMC with a 2015 Ford F350. That was paid for with district funds for the replacement, vehicle replacement fund held for that 1988 GMC. When you guys own vehicles, you have a required, you know more about this than me, but a capital replacement fund that you pay into. There was money in that fund. We worked the deal with Alexis through the agreement to replace that vehicle in 2015, but we didn't want to dedicate that vehicle 100% to water response, because if you think back to the slide, we did 4 or 5 water responses last year. So it made sense to make it a general vehicle and then develop a trailer for water response so that it's multi-use. And then, the US exchange rate led to higher costs, to be expected, really. The building, the District of Squamish owns the building. We have a lease signed in 2015 at the same time as the agreement that we're working under. Mayor Heinzman signed it. So we have a lease for the building for 5 years. I think that's the maximum time the district can enter any agreement, by my understanding. There was a safety inspection performed last year, some issues remediated, that's great. And we're looking at again, BJ talked briefly about this, we're looking at some capital upgrades in the building. The agreement that Alexis and I really worked on, sort of dictates how capital upgrades can be managed. We have to run them by the building facilities manager, which is Camilla Say, as you guys know. And so we're talking to Camilla about some capital upgrades in the building that would make our lives better.
Really what we want to do is build a mezzanine
Yeah.
across the, I don't know if that makes sense to anybody. If you're not familiar with their building, it may not, but where their vehicles park, we think there's a chance that we can build a platform across the back half of that, which will give us obviously some more floor space and storage space, but also and a big part of it is if we can do it in such a way where we can use that upper floor as our station to do our rope training. Then we have an indoor area to do our rope training, which would be pretty cool.
This is really in the concept phase too, so if you go ask Camilla and she says, I've never seen a blueprint, she probably hasn't, but we do know the process and we need to talk to Camilla about that.
He's always the last to know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so safety, BJ mentioned the survey that the SAR management team developed, BJI and 4 others. And the survey to our membership was really focused on 3 things. It was leadership, focus on safety, which is critical in the volunteer work that we do, and then opportunities for learning and development within the organization. And it's funny, it sounds like a workplace, and in many ways it's very similar, but we do want to help support the development of our membership. But safety being the key focus there, and in 2016, 86 operational responses, 100 call-outs, hundreds of training events. We had no injuries and no time loss, which is great. We do have a functional safety program managed by a safety coordinator and a corrective action log and all those sorts of things that you'd see in a workplace. So I think that's reflected in the no time loss. We've adopted operating guidelines, EMBC, Emergency Management BC, the division of the Ministry of Transportation, sets guidelines for what we do as SAR volunteers, and we've adopted a bunch of operating guidelines and adapted that to Squamish Search and Rescue for 2017. We have an avalanche response safety program. We have an avalanche safety plan, which again is a requirement of a workplace. That's also required for us as volunteers. And so we have a written avalanche safety plan signed off by a professional member of the Canadian Avalanche Association, which dictates who can do what and go into what kinds of terrain and how we do those things. And so that's updated each fall, and it was last fall moving into this winter.
One of the other sort of components of our SAR safety plan is it's Nadine Beckham who runs it, but she also sits on the provincial SAR Safety Council. So a lot of the stuff that we've developed, I don't want to say we're ahead of other teams, but we're implementing sooner than other teams and taking the ideas that Squamish has and sharing them province-wide, which is pretty cool for our team. So safety again, safety briefings are critical in everything we do. We do it before every training event, we do it on every task. So SAR manager briefs team leaders brief team members. If things change in the field, and they always do, a new assessment, risk assessment, and safety briefing should be done and is done in many cases. If we have incidents or near misses, and I mentioned the corrective action log, those things are investigated and recorded and documented. And yeah, we take them as learning opportunities. This is a breakdown of how many of our members responded to how many calls for last year. So 62 total members. In that time, we've
we've experienced some attrition and then done the intake, which we do about every 3 years, of about 15 members. So that number's higher than 62 right now. But you can see essentially, if you go the top 4 bullets, 12, 37, and 23, something like nearly 70% of our members attended less than 20% of the calls, which means that BJ does 99%, and that's true. So like any volunteer organization, with a membership of 62, there are kind of 20 heavy lifters, and then many other active participants who just prioritize other things in their life, and we certainly don't fault them for that, but that's the reality of it. We can just go to the next slide. I don't know how we're doing for time here.
Just, we're
We're at our time. So lots of hours go in, events, prevention. So DOS agreement, this is relevant, and so I'm gonna push the schedule a little bit on this one, unless you guys put the gavel down. So we signed an agreement early in 2015 for a 5-year term, which defined the relationship between Squamish SAR and the District of Squamish. We are now entering the 3rd year. It seems still quite new to Alexis and I. I'll speak for Alexis, but we're getting over halfway through it at this point. The agreement provides for up to $12,000 in core funding each year. Up to isn't exactly true because it's exactly each year $12,000, but the way it's done is that District of Squamish provides vehicle maintenance, insurance, and fuel for most of our vehicles, maybe not every one. All defined in the agreement and the schedules. And this year, that cost nearly $10,000. The remainder of those $12,000 is then granted to the Squamish Search and Rescue Society as annual operating funds. And I think, Alexis, the check is almost ready, so for the 2016 year. And then, so that's really the basic terms of the agreement. We provide the services we provide. DOS provides $12,000 annual core funding and a lease to the building that the district owns. And that costs $1 for the 5-year term. So certainly not to be overlooked. It's a great space for us. I guess we're over time, so I'll leave it there. Yeah, I guess I won't leave it there. We had a bunch of elections. That's our board of directors for the 2017 calendar year. Lots of hard work in each of those positions. Let's just keep this moving. We have an organizational chart. Each of the board members sits in the 3rd row from the top, and then under them are equipment, training, and other kinds of coordinators. And all those boxes need to get filled with different names. So that's just the society work. There's not one task covered anywhere in that box. Oh, and then the final, not to be forgotten. Oh, you took it out. So, thanks very much. Sorry to rush through the last few, but we were apparently out of time, so really appreciate you guys taking the time to meet with us.
Well, I appreciate you sticking to the agenda time, but we do have a little bit of flexibility. Are there any questions or comments from council? Okay.
Thanks for the presentation and the work you do in the community. One of the questions I had, and this came up earlier in the year, because our fire services were able to purchase equipment with North Vancouver and save money. And I'm wondering if the SAR organizations across the mainland look at combining their purchasing power to...
We haven't, no. Like, not for direct equipment. I'm not sure really that it would make a ton of sense in the same way it does with the fire department. There's certainly some of the things that we do share is the actual teams. So if we needed extra qualified road people, we can call on Lions Bay, Whistler, Pembroke, anywhere in the province really. If we needed an avalanche team, if we needed sort of like a specialty team, we can call those out. As well as if we needed some sort of specialty equipment that we didn't have, we can call on those other teams. So it's kind of already in place, but to save a couple of $1,000 to have to rely on a volunteer in Whistler to drive a piece of equipment down, I'm not sure really makes the same sort of sense that the fire guys do.
And the funding models are very different between what we were able to do with the fire department versus search and rescue. And search and rescue, for a lot of their equipment, they're actually getting a lot of it funded through the province and stuff like that. So it's not the same way in which we could collectively bring a group together and buy something cheaper for the same thing. Because what the needs of here will be different than the needs of a search and rescue team in Chilliwack.
Yeah, and the way that we share sort of resources and equipment is it's kind of already done, almost in the same way. I'm not sure what your agreement is with the North Shore, but I know how Vancouver and the North Shore and Burnaby and the North Shore Fire Service share sort of that type of stuff, and that's very similar to what we already have in place in the way that we already do it.
Ted?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank you guys for all your hard work and staff for putting this all together, because it's a pretty quality setup that we have in Squamish. So thanks for all that.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a great team. One of the things that we talk about it a lot, but certainly Doug or whomever is most welcome to get in touch with Tennessee and I at any time. We can arrange either a tour or come by and meet the team at a training night, or one of those types of things. It's we certainly would encourage this table to take advantage of what we think we have an open door policy. So not a lot of people think about coming and knocking on the door to do it, but it's certainly there, an invitation for you to at any time.
Before I go to Patty, I mean, that's not a bad idea, because it was last term, actually, I think was the last time I was in the premises, and there are 3 new councillors, and so it might be an idea to do that.
Yeah, no,
And
any
arrange
time.
that to Alexis,
Sure.
for a meeting, that would be quite informative. Patty?
Yeah, I was gonna suggest that, so we're into year, sort of halfway through the lease term, or almost halfway through the lease term. At what point do we start negotiating the next one? I want it to be a nice seamless,
Yeah.
clean.
Never would be nice.
Yeah, effortless.
I think the agreement, Alexis might correct me if I'm wrong, I think it says start negotiating within 12 months of expiry. So, we're still, we're just starting the 3rd year, we're really basically halfway through the agreement period. So 15 to 20, it'd be 2019 is when we can really start negotiating. I mean, Alexis and I talk a lot,
Yeah.
and, with any little wrinkles we sort of sort out. I feel like we probably have a pretty good handle on, where we might like to see some changes in the agreement. It's generally working very well for both sides, I think. Yeah, 2019 is when we start talking, and I guess that's through an election cycle for all of you, or at least most of you, and who knows where I'll be. I won't speak for Alexis in 2019 too, but that's the way that would work.
So I think I heard what I wanted to hear, that, as things come about, if there's little wrinkles, you guys can figure it out. If there's something we both want to change, we can change the agreement midstream.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's a clause in there about open.
Yeah, so-
But there's
As
really,
long as we're being really mindful of that.
I think we've definitely seen great improvements in how and even after the 2nd year, it's got smoother and smoother as we go, and we both are aware of what we'd want to change for when we do the contract. So I don't think there'll be any huge surprises, or I hope that
no, there shouldn't be. I mean, one of the big fears, I talked about it briefly, is, the $12,000 annual core funding, which is a great contribution to our team, but it's a relatively small number. And if we were to experience something catastrophic, like, I don't know what, but something, and, $12,000 doesn't cover it, and we're in the hole. We obviously have other sources of revenue, and our major funder is the province of BC, and so we would look to that. But I guess in Alexify, we've talked about the scenario before, and the various ways we can manage it. But my fear is that some expense comes up which vastly exceeds that $12,000 amount, and we're not sure how we're going to cover that one.
If we want to move forward. And how much does the SLRD contribute to Search and Rescue directly?
We've
different.
Yeah, I don't believe that we got a contribution from the SLRD in 2016 directly to Squamish SAR. In the past, they have made some contributions. I know in 2015, they gave us around $3,000 for some equipment purchase, which was great. I guess like on that little org chart I showed, I'm the District Squamish liaison, and that's sort of morphed into government liaison, and I really haven't followed up with Director Rainbow or anyone else at the SLRD in the last year or so. It's just not been the top priority. So I really don't know where we're at with them, to be totally honest.
Just curious. Thank you. Good job, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. So I will add my thanks to the organization and you gentlemen. I think you are certainly a critical part of our community, particularly when we brand ourselves as an outdoor adventure area, it leads to all kinds of things, and not all of them are perfect, so you're a very necessary part of our community. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alexis.
Thanks, you guys. Good to see you.
Same building.
This make its way back to Karen, so
Karen.
I don't know her
The
name.
IT person.
Yes.
The Mac wizard.
Right.
Thanks,
All right.
David.
Thanks, Justin.
That's okay. We'll fill you up later.
Yeah, exactly. Gotcha.
Next up is under business, number 1, Public Works benchmarking. Mr. Pinchenko.
Good morning, thank you for having me. I apologize in advance because I have a whole bunch more statistics for you.
So just so you know, this the microphone is a little black thing in front of you, so you have to be close to it. So standing up doesn't work.
Thank you, appreciate that. Good morning, and thank you for having me. Just going to apologize in advance that I'm going to follow that with a whole bunch more
We love
statistics.
stats.
But we'll try to keep it as entertaining as possible. And I do have some handouts here. It's just the graphs that you'll see in the presentation. Thanks, Bob. So if I go through something too quickly, you can refer back. Thanks, Bob. Okay, so this morning we'll be talking about the District of Squamish Public Works Department's benchmarking initiative. This is something we've been working on for the past 2 years. Just to reintroduce it to you, it's spearheaded by Public Works, but it wouldn't be possible without participation from engineering, GIS, finance, and human resources. So a huge thank you to those departments that also participate. The initiative requires participation in 2 privately organized programs, one being the National Water and Wastewater Benchmarking Initiative, which captures water, wastewater collection, and wastewater treatment, to which we'll be adding stormwater in 2017, and also the Yardstick Parks Benchmarking Initiative. Together, they combine for 556 indices, which requires a significant amount of staff effort for collecting information, and includes participation from 70+ municipalities across Canada. Bob Smith, our Director of Engineering, is going to join us. Some of the municipalities that participate are Whistler, West Vancouver, Abbotsford, Port Moody, Coquitlam, Richmond, Nanaimo, Victoria, Kamloops, Kelowna, and a few others across Canada. So I'm going to run through a couple of the graphs just to give you an idea of some of the information or the breadth of the information that we collect. You'll see Squamish on the left-hand side here. And there's 2 main types of graphs that come with the Water and Wastewater Benchmarking Initiative. You get a group graph like this where you have all municipalities in your category, and you also have, there'll be another graph you'll see coming up that is a min-max median. Just a reminder that negative values on all the graphs represent 0 data being collected, and that communities are organized on the x-axis in the order of increase in population. So Squamish being the smallest community participating in the group. We are, just to remind you, we are under a confidentiality agreement through the program, so it just means that we won't share other municipalities' information with the public. And in turn, they wouldn't do that without our permission as well. The AECOM, the program's managing company, does put out an annual public report every year that is available online. Sorry, so this graph is our total cost to provide wastewater services per capita. And then it also breaks it into what those costs are. Is it capital funding, is it debt servicing, and then operations and maintenance as well. The next one, I'm going to run through these ones fairly quickly, just to kind of give you an idea again of the breadth of information we look at. This one is greenhouse gas emissions from energy consumed in the operation of our wastewater collection pump stations. So Squamish being one of the smaller communities in the group, on the lower end of the total pump station horsepower installed, and then this gives us an idea of what our greenhouse gas emissions are based on our energy consumption and the amount of horsepower we have.
Can I just have something explained, Jim?
Go ahead.
What, with regard to confidentiality, I'm just curious why, those are just other communities, this is not public information, why would any of that be confidential?
It's just an agreement that states that we won't share their information without their permission.
It's actually not public information. This is part of the group and I think the meaning behind that, Ryan, is to protect those that are not necessarily being as effective as they could.
We're government, you shouldn't be protecting them.
Yeah, well, no, but we compare ourselves. We can see how we're doing against
Yeah.
ourselves, and we can see how we are with other communities. We can see those numbers, so we can actually contact the people in the organization, in the group, and ask them how they're doing better than us or worse than us. We can have those conversations, but the idea is just to not get that out into the public realm.
Yeah, it's a philosophical issue, because I think all of that should be in the public realm, 100%. I believe legislation says that too, so it should, I find it kind of weird. Okay, thanks.
But just going to the slide, this is not per horsepower, this is just the total expended. So when you look at our purple bar, which is a lower purple bar than some of the other communities, but that's not on a pro rata basis, is it? Or is that just a total number based on the number of?
It's a total amount of kilograms of greenhouse gas emitted by our pump stations throughout the year. Where the horsepower comes in is the little white dot. But you're right, it's not per horsepower.
So that doesn't tell us whether we're doing well on a per horsepower basis compared to another municipality or not.
We do have another graph that gives us that per horsepower number, so we can look at that and do some optimization around that.
And question, the pump station, so the scatter graph of the horsepower in the pump station, what does that, it's hard to understand what that represents across all communities. Is each scatter graph of the horsepower per pump station like per community? Is it a rising, it looks like a rising scatter graph?
The little dots.
Yeah.
Yes, so left to right on the x-axis is in order of increasing installed horsepower.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's just the way they've plotted the graph. Moving on. This one is number of water quality complaints by reason. So Squamish in 2015 had 0 water quality complaints, or official water quality complaints from our community, which is, I think, a huge endorsement for the quality of water we have here. And this is an example of one of the other graphs that gets produced. This is the min-max median graph and our number of water main breaks per 100 kilometer of length. So this is nice because we can begin to see the trending year over year of how we're performing, if we're making operational changes, how is it affecting our system. We can see an increase from 2013 to 2014.
Current data.
Yes, and I will touch on that if that's okay. So we do see a minor increase in the number of water main breaks we've experienced, but we're still below the group average. The group average being across Canada, again, about 40 communities. And we're also looking at HR metrics. So number of lost hours due to accidents occurring during operation and maintenance per 1,000 labor hours. Again, Squamish is being on the very low end, which speaks to our safety programs here. Additionally, what's new this year is we are producing a financial sustainability dashboard. So where we're doing well is the average age of our water pipes in years is on the low end of the average across the group, which is great. However, our 5-year average capital reinvestment divided by the estimated cost to replace the entire system is on the lower end of the group. So essentially what it's saying is at our current rate of investment, it would take us 200 years to fully replace the entire water system. Another area where we're doing well is in comparison to the group is in our operation and maintenance costs. So our O&M cost per capita is lower than the group average, and our O&M cost per kilometer of water main is on the low end of the group average as well. So,
Can I just stop you there? Capital reinvestment. A few years ago, we started this program of replacing the asbestos concrete piping, which was giving us problems in the water system. And my recollection was that it was about something between a 20 and 40-year project at a rate of, I think, $1 to $2 million a year that we were putting in there. But 200 years isn't what I recall.
It's a different number, yeah. So these numbers we get from actual spent values in the capital plan for the water utility or the sewer utility, depending on which utility we're looking at. And the thing to remember too is that we only currently have data for 2013, 2014 years. So some of that may not, I should apologize, we are collecting data for 2015 and 2016 right now. But what year would have that happened where that?
Oh, it was in my first term. So it was somewhere around 2009, 10, 11, somewhere in there. We started committing to this program. It's when we were told that the pipes had to be replaced when they were end of the lifespan and so forth.
Yeah.
And since then, we've been consistently budgeting, and probably not a consistent amount, but in my recollection, it's between $1 and $2 million a year, something like that,
Yeah.
for water main replacement. And it's on a priority basis, and staff is determining its priorities. But my understanding was it was about $40 million to do the whole thing, and so at the rate we were going, it was going to be somewhere between 20 and 40 years to do the whole thing.
Chair, I believe that was the 2010 asset management program that came out of engineering. In terms of the numbers, though, I don't have them in front of me, but we can certainly clarify what that projected in terms of our financial plan and how it dovetailed.
Well, I guess for me, at least, coming out of that is 200 years doesn't seem like a very efficient way of dealing with it. And should we be increasing the rate that we apply that to? And that's a budget discussion, of course, and so more of an ongoing discussion. So I think if that is the case, speaking for myself, I think we'd like to have that come back to council in some form for a discussion about whether that's the proper way to go about doing this and dealing with this. Because the pipes won't last 200 years. That's everything we've been told says no. So if we can't do it within the next 20 to 40 years, then we're going to have increasing problems. That was the information that I had sometime earlier.
So I think you're very right, and what I've noticed from looking at the year-over-year information and from some of the draft graphs that we have coming for the 2015, 2016 years is that it really started to ramp up in 2012, 13, 14, and so that the amount of investment that's occurring now has increased, and this dashboard unfortunately doesn't show that just yet. So it's one that I'd be keen to bring back next year with some more up-to-date information.
Yeah, I'll leave it to staff to sort through that and maybe bring it back. Thank you. Does anybody else have any comment about it?
Good point.
Go ahead.
Cool. I guess the last one I was just going to touch on is our reserves over O&M costs is kind of on the verge there between yellow and green, and I do know that's something that our finance department has worked hard to address as well. So it's hopefully moving forward an area where we will see improvement. The nice thing about getting into our data is it also allows us to develop in-house charts that make sense for Squamish and really allows us to analyze what we're doing. So what this is a chart of our 2013, 2014, 2015, and 2016 water consumption weekly averages. So you can see, you get the regular, the low consumption periods in fall, winter, and spring, and then the high usage periods in the summer. The high usage periods in the summer being largely weather dependent. So if we have a really hot summer or a few really hot weeks in the summer, and you'll see a big spike like you do there in 2015 when we had some hot weather. Or on a cooler year like in 2016 where it's less extreme, you see lower peak day demands. Where we see growth in the community in this graph is in the shoulder seasons, which are largely population dependent, and you can see that year-over-year increase of 2 to 3% consumption, which fortunately, I think, or really intuitively, it lines up with the 2016 census data, which shows a 2 to 3% per year growth in community population. We see a similar growth in our biosolids production at the wastewater treatment plant. So here you've got the red line, which is follows our previous year's information, and which is more of a trend, and then the green bars, which are our actual biosolids produced 2013 through 16. Interestingly, between 2013 and 2014, we had a 10% increase. 14 to 15, we had a 12% increase. But 2015 to 2016, we had an anomaly. We only had a 6% increase. And I think it corresponds with our green waste program that came into effect. It actually created an estimated 8% offset in the amount of biosolids we're producing at the wastewater treatment plant, likely due to people having the choice to put their green waste in the compost bin instead of putting it down a carburetor. We also, in wastewater treatment, like to believe that we've created some optimizations at the plant, and we have spearheaded an initiative where we've been reducing our polymer consumption to try to reduce the volume of the biosolids being produced.
I'll just stop you there. Go ahead, Ben.
Do you mind going back to the water one, the next one? So I think this is a little concerning in that, I mean, we've been trying to initiate a whole bunch of things that reduce our water consumption.
Yes.
But it still is mirroring the population increase. We're not seeing any gains.
I have another slide coming up that should address your question,
Okay.
if I may.
And I'm just trying to, I can't read this. Is this per liters per person, or is this overall, just overall consumption?
Overall consumption.
Overall, we don't break it down yet. Okay. Okay. Yeah, and this one was interesting because it's like, are we pooping less? What's going on? I was like, how did, we're vegetarian? Or less?
You don't want to
So we're not going
I kind of did, continue.
We're
gonna take control
we're sticking
of this
with
meeting,
the green waste program. Huge win. So this is the slide that should address your question, Mayor Heinzman, is that we see our population increasing year over year from 2003 to 2016, yet our average per capita day demand has reduced during that time frame. So to me, that shows us that our leak detection and water conservation programs have had some success.
We're still very high though. We're still at 550 liters per person today, is that correct?
It's, if I may, it's difficult for us in Squamish, or at least in Public Works, to determine what our actual residential per capita consumption is, because we don't have ICI metering yet. So we can't split out ICI connections, multifamily connections, and residential connections the way other communities can.
But it's coming.
It is.
Go ahead, Ben.
Can I ask what happened in 2007, 2008? causes that drop? Do you? Anyone remember what happened?
Which drop are you looking at?
The red line in per capita consumption drops.
Oh,
We
that-
did start to do quite a bit, just public awareness type stuff, and I'm trying to remember, I think we did, I remember from Scott, we did a few key leaks fixes back then.
What I would call, and that's utility department, they did start the program. Oh,
Sorry.
Yeah, you have to come up and sit at the table.
yeah,
Does that have microphones? No.
Yeah, it does. Give it a mic.
Up next to Gary.
Off topic.
So I just looked at Scott because he was here.
From HR.
From what I recall, that is not my department, but from what I recall, they were beginning to start their leak detection at that point in time. But it really fully came in when Bob Smith arrived in 2010.
But we had started, we had a lot of leaks back then.
Around?
Go ahead.
Okay, so that's kind of the basics of it. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about infrastructure, and I am trying to be conscious of time here, so if you need me to hurry along, certainly let me know.
We had you, just on that point, we had you good till 11:15, and after that, we're going into Bob's time a little bit, but
Okay.
we have some flexibility at the end of it anyway.
All right, I'll try to respect that. So a little bit about infrastructure. It's not sexy, but it works, and it's the kind of thing that if anything exciting happens, we've probably done it wrong. There's a lot of bad things that can happen when infrastructure fails, as I'm sure you're all aware. I just wanted to talk a little bit about what we're doing in sanitary and storm sewer areas to try to prevent this from happening. Sewer backups on the top might be a sanitary sewer backup in someone's basement. On the right side could even be something as simple as a catch basin being clogged in a storm system. Could flood a city street. It's also the reason why the roads and drainage crew goes around and does drainage checks during a snowstorm to make sure those catch basins are clear so that the water can drain and not flood the roads. When we get our traditional Squamish freezing to melting routine. So some of the causes for storm and sanitary sewer blockages include grease, roots, debris, and structural failure. The preventative maintenance solutions we have to try and address this are regular inspection and maintenance to catch problems before they affect customers. So things like video inspection, flushing, or jet rotting, and scheduled repairs of all of those issues. And I'm going to give you a general overview of reactive versus preventative or emergency maintenance. I did review this slide last year, but I think it really sets up my next point nicely. The next 4 slides will just demonstrate why the district staff perform preventative maintenance and discuss costs both material and immaterial. So preventative maintenance, it happens before a failure occurs during normal business hours. It's communicated in advance. It limits service disruption, generally resulting in happy customers, whereas reactive maintenance happens after a failure has occurred or is occurring. It disrupts scheduled maintenance, requires overtime a lot of the time, can result in service disruption, property and environmental damage, and generally results in unhappy customers. The costs of deferring maintenance. Yes, you can reduce your annual O&M costs by reducing the amount of preventative maintenance you are completing. However, generally your overtime and the risk cost associated with that will increase over time. Deferring maintenance, we can talk about that. An example of this is that yes, you can save a few dollars in the short term by not doing regular oil changes on your car, but in the long run you will pay more when your engine blows up and you have to make those repairs. And in addition, you will have the immaterial costs of not being able to use your car, so the service disruption and the frustration that goes along with that. And although it may be okay for that to happen to a vehicle, it's not okay for us to have that happen at the wastewater treatment plant because the consequences to the environment are very severe, which I'm sure you all know. So through benchmarking, we've been able to create a business case for preventative maintenance. This is looking at our water distribution system. Our total maintenance hours per kilometer of length between 2013 and 2014 increased significantly, actually more than doubled. So this is the amount of time we're spending on preventative maintenance. As you'd expect, the amount of FTEs we're applying towards that maintenance of the water system increased as well. But what happened during that time is the total amount of corrective maintenance, or generally overtime per total maintenance hours, was cut in half, and a cost savings of about $600 per kilometer of water main was realized. And when you multiply that $600 by 143 kilometers of water main, that results in an $86,000 savings. So that's the business case for preventative maintenance. Now I'd like to talk to you a little bit about succession planning. And really this is a tale of a couple of independent studies that were completed in 2015. One by the BC Water and Waste Association, which represents all management, supervisors, technical staff, and operators that are in the water and wastewater industry, and also by the Environmental Operator Certification Program that is regulated by the province specifically to certify water and wastewater operators. The BC Water and Waste Association found that over 36% of the labor force was over 50. The EOCP found that 43% of their labor force, the operators alone, were over 50. So the result of this essentially is that due to retirements and growth in the industry in the next 10 years, the BC Water and Waste Association forecasts that more than half of the workforce in BC will have to be replaced in the water and wastewater industry. So that's a significant challenge. So how do we solve this problem? The answer is succession planning. So knowledge transfer, training from within, attractivating motivated staff for the Squamish brand, and this is our opportunity to thank Council for continuing to support our training and succession planning initiatives. If we didn't have the budget to do that, it would be a lot more challenging. So how is Squamish doing? I'm going to say thanks to Bob Smith's succession planning initiative, which I feel like I'm a big part of. Generally, we're under the average of the group in the water and wastewater sector. So more of our, in all categories, under 50, we have more staff. In categories over 50, we have less than the group average. But the problem is this creates a knowledge gap. So we don't have a lot of the senior staff available to train the more junior staff, so we need to invest more in our training initiatives. And then the last thing I'd like to cover is kind of a general review of our yardstick benchmarking program. This, because it was our first year, we had to do a bit of an inventory process. So it's more high level, and if we can just touch on a few things, I'll kind of give you the high level of where we're at in Squamish with parks. So in the total area of land provided, so this is a lot of our green space. Squamish bills itself as Hardwired for Adventure, and in the past the Outdoor Recreation Capital of Canada, which I think applies. We have double the amount of designated parkland of the group in the yardstick program. When it comes to actively maintained park, however, per 1,000 residents, we're slightly under average. And when it comes to provision of sports parks, this is where we can look at it two ways. Either we excel, we're way better than the group, or we have a whole lot of sports park to maintain, and this is solely because of the large area we have at Brennan Park. When it comes to playgrounds, per 1,000 children under 15, we are above average. But what does this mean for us in operations? It means our cost per hectare is below average because we have so many hectares of land. However, the total direct annual operating cost, that per 1,000 residents that we pay is higher because we have so much more, we have all this green space to maintain, but a smaller population than most. And where the rubber meets the road when benchmarking, when you get through all the statistics and you pull out the stories, it comes down to optimization. So the whole plan, do, check, act cycle. Some of the areas we've made improvements in benchmarking, we've reduced the amount of unidirectional flushing we're doing in the water utility. Basically, we put our numbers next to the rest of Canada's and said, wow, we're doing, double or triple the amount of flushing we need to be. So we're consuming more water and we're spending more money to do it. So we pared that back. And I think that's been one of the big successes of the program. Some other areas we're looking at making improvements are hydrant maintenance. We're reducing polymer consumption at the wastewater treatment plant. And then some of the other initiatives that the district's taking on through the technology transformation program are really going to help us be better at benchmarking and optimize our operations in public works even more. So the finance software, the asset management and work management software will give us more data at our fingertips when we want it. And the fleet software that we've just completed installing in that department is going to give us some more information as well. Our opportunities are to continue to integrate benchmarking into our daily processes. We're going to be adding stormwater benchmarking for 2016, 17. Well, in 2017, we'll benchmark the 2016 year. And in the future, we'd like to do roads and fleet benchmarking as well. And an important part of this whole cycle is celebrating our successes, which is kind of part of what we're doing today. We've had excellent buy-in from all departments that, I wouldn't be able to be here today to present this information to you if that didn't happen. We've implemented enhanced data recording processes. We've got data collection underway for the 2015 and 2016 year. And another improvement to address Councillor Chappelle's question about data currency is that the Water and Wastewater Benchmarking Initiative, it actually has changed their schedule this year to allow us to get information 5 months sooner. So hopefully by the end of the 2017, I'll be able to report on 2016 and 15. Are there any questions?
Council? Go ahead, Karen.
So you talked about some of the changes that you made because of what you've seen in the benchmarking program. So this program costs us money.
Yes.
And it's a good investment, but are we also tracking for our public the savings that we're accomplishing because of the changes we're making from benchmarking? So if we're making this investment in future councils, we want them to keep making this investment in benchmarking. Can we eventually show that by benchmarking we are saving money? And are we tracking that? Because I think that's important, and I think that makes the business case for why we invest in these types of benchmarking programs. And if we can't provide that evidence to our citizens and to future councils, then, if there's a budget crunch, it's like, well, what's easy to cut? Oh, well, benchmarking. Let's just keep doing what we're doing. And so I think there's an argument to be made to make sure that we're, as you make changes like reducing the polymer, doing less flushing, how much is that saving us? And does that, compensate for more than we're spending on the benchmark?
So before I go to other councillors, I'll go to staff 35. Bob, go ahead.
I got the look from Ben, so through the chair, I'd like to respond to that one. Yeah, this is the really exciting part for me. I'm pretty pumped. Ben has been doing an amazing job for us for tracking this data. We've now got 3 years solid coming into our 4th year, and this is where we really get to do those exact things, those optimizations. You got to see about 5 or 6 of the indices we have. We've got 500.
Yeah.
And each one of those is a little window of an opportunity for Ben to get in with a little screwdriver and pick away at it to find the ways to optimize that. And that's exactly what we're doing. His objective was to gather this data and then to optimize our operation. So, the polymer cost, we keep mentioning that as one of the examples. It's $26,000 about every 6 or 8 weeks for polymer. It's an area that we're saying, hey, that's a lot of money. How can we save money here? So we start grabbing that low-hanging fruit, and that's happening. So yes, we certainly will have that. And further to Mayor Heinzman's comment about kind of the having some of that data as proprietary data, our stuff is not. We can open that up. I mean, we're happy. I didn't bring my book today. I was kind of kicking myself, but our binder with the indices is about that thick. We're happy to share that. You can flip through and see all of those indices and see where we're at. We're more than happy to share that data. With the park stuff, that's kind of the beginning. That's the way it starts. It's like, what do you have? So you can kind of see we've got a lot of parks. We've got a lot of expensive parks to maintain, like the sports fields. It's a good thing. It's good for our community to have. Now we need to figure out, it's like, okay, how do we optimize? How do we make it more efficient? How do we do that? So yeah, it's in my mind, the best part about the benchmarking is being able to do something with the data.
Did you want to make a comment about that, Ben?
Yeah, and just to add to what Bob's saying, I think to address your comment, we can show the business cases for benchmarking a few times over. Even just being able to show that we've reduced our biosolids our production by 350 tons, that's 350 times 140 is a significant amount of money. Benchmarking costs us I think we're up to about $18,000 a year now for benchmarking, but what we can show that we're saving through other various programs that the district is supporting, I think more than pays for that.
Can I just follow up?
Sure. And then I'll go to Patty, then Susan, and then Ted.
So I know each year we publish our annual report, but these kinds of statistics to show a small investment gets us a huge return. I think that's a really good news story for the district of Squamish. That we are trying to spend our citizens' dollars wisely. When we can show those kinds of returns on investment, I think that's really important. It shouldn't get lost. I think it's good for our operations department. I think it's good for our citizens. So, that's what I'm saying. Don't be shy about showing us why we're doing this and showing Squamish why we're doing this. I think it's really, really important work. And the fact that we're being responsive to the information we're getting is equally a good story. So, thank you.
Patty.
Yeah, just building on that, in those graphs where we show the trends, it'd be really good to on them actually show initiatives like this is when we did a major leak detection, this is when we brought in new protocols for this is when we made this capital investment here. So you can actually start to tell the story. Because if you're not sort of telling the stories, Councilor Elliott said, you're missing the purpose of the benchmarking, which is to inform our policies and our operations, as well as to make sure we're communicating with the public the value of their tax dollars and their utility dollars. With regard to this comparable group, because it's all blanked out, it's hard to know. I mean, it's a Canada-wide group, is it? Yeah, and I mean, I just want to make sure we're evaluating ourselves fairly. And I don't know how this group is set up, but municipalities in Ontario are much older than municipalities in BC, so their infrastructure is at a different stage in their life. So I just want to make sure we're really comparing apples to apples and not sort of getting our head of ourselves in certain categories because it makes us look good or not. So just want to, I can't understand why the other governments aren't open with their data. Like, it just makes no sense to me whatsoever. However, I just want to make sure we're comparing apples to apples and not knowing who we're comparing ourselves to, or what the average age of their infrastructure is versus the average age of our infrastructure. Don't know if it means anything. So we just have to be cognizant of trying to tell a story that maybe doesn't have a meaning to it, or maybe has a lot of meaning to it, and we need to make sure it's clear about what that is. But good job. It's a great start.
Susan.
Thanks. I guess I'm a little unclear on, are we funding a separate benchmarking program? Is it, or are you just presenting the data that we collect on a regular basis in order to maintain our systems correctly and presenting it in a way that informs us and allows us to make better decisions on our infrastructure? So I'm always unclear when we're looking at benchmarking for water and sewer. We collect that data anyways. Having somebody to be able to present it or understand it and document it, is that a separate program that other councils can cut? I'm not really sure I understood Councillor Elliott's question.
I think it is, but I'll let staff respond to that. It's the membership in that group, I think, that costs us at $18,000 or $16,000.
Is it 18?
There's membership in 2 different groups that cost us that dollar value, yes. And what that gets us is participation in the group, so we have the information to compare ourselves to, but it also gets us access to best practices through that group. So the group sits down and says, okay, well, what's the best way to do stuff? You know, what are you doing? What are you doing? What's the group average? And it really allows you to develop those best practices along the way.
Thanks, can you just follow up? So yeah, I consider that just prudent operations. I wouldn't even consider that benchmarking. I would consider that like looking at best practices and being able to measure and present your information in a comprehensive way. And as well, as well as Mayor Heinzman being able to looking at other communities. If we can't know what communities we're comparing ourselves to, then it misses the mark on benchmarking. But still, as a municipality, if our systems operators can be able to sit down and look outside our community for best practices, that's invaluable. And that's benchmarking sometimes is considered just like, oh, here's the graphs or here's how we're doing. But it's so much more than that. It's being able to actually look outside our community and analyze our data in a way that our community can value it and make changes and adjust as things move into the future with our infrastructure.
So before I go to Ted, and then I'm going to put myself on the list, but Linda, did you have a comment? And
Just
then Bob?
one in terms of telling the story and in terms of the business case and cost savings, and I'm stating the obvious, but perhaps for the public benefit, is that the other exciting story is the reduction in GHGs and the reduction in water consumption, which also justifies the program.
One of the things about going with these programs is it is a consulting engineering firm that we're dealing with. It's AECOM is the one that we deal with for the water and wastewater, and Yardstick is the company that we deal with for the benchmarking for parks. They have a consistent mechanism where they bring in all of the costs, and it's consistent across the board. So for example, we bring in our vehicle costs when we're working with our equipment, and sometimes, you know, is admin costs included in that? So those costs can be really different if you aren't exactly consistent. So across the 60 communities, we are consistent, and I completely agree with you, Mayor Heinzman. If you're looking at a community in Halifax, for example, which is even older than Ontario, where they've got 300-year, 200-year-old infrastructure, you have to be able to bring that into play. Hydrants, for example, in Calgary, where they have hot soils, deep bury, long winter, versus us, if we're cheaper than them by 10%, we're not doing a good job. We need to know that we have to be 100% cheaper than them. So there's a lot of variables that we have to bring in on the technical side, but we're fully cognizant of that, and it is an important point to make, is being able to make sure it's apples and apples.
Ted?
Yeah, thanks. Well, kind of to Patty's point and Doug's point about the group, and you made it a little clearer there, but that number 200 years for our pipes, I wonder if that has been kind of confused because we're comparing to other communities that have larger amounts of problems. I mean, you know, in the whole report, which I, you know, thought was good, you know, that 200 years just, I thought, you know, there's a flaw in the report if you've got a number like that. So, you know, as far as understanding how the all works, that maybe that is that. And to Karen's point about the good news story, I think that's paramount. And, you know, like showing our savings, like she says, and getting the message out to the community. I know every year when I go to UBCM and LMGA, and we meet with all the other communities in the province, I go to the infrastructure ones where it might be solid waste, and we go to a seminar and sit there and listen to everybody, and they say, oh, you should be doing this, and I'm going, oh, well, we're doing that. And, you know, you go to another one, oh, well, you should be doing this, and I think, oh, well, we're doing that too. And so I always feel like getting up and bragging to all the other poor communities that aren't doing this, right? So I think knowing where we stand in the scheme of things is pretty important. And that might be a benchmark that the group gets onto, so that, you know, you can pick the ones that are doing the best. Anyway.
Thank you. And I have myself on the list, and then I'll go to Mayor. I also think this is a really good news story, and and I think you should be out there trumpeting this, or we should be out there trumpeting this. I put it in the annual report, but it kind of gets lost in there with a whole bunch of other stuff. For me, this is a huge communications piece, and hook it up with Public Works Week or something like that. Because I think in addition to showing that you're doing the right thing and there are savings in the community, I think most importantly, it's not that we're trying to get reelected or anything like that. Most importantly, I think it reinforces good behavior. Because people see that, oh yeah, if I don't do this and so forth, this is the effect of it, and yeah, it is making a difference. So I think it's very important to give this a real priority for communication. And if you just bury it off in some report, somebody might read it, but most won't. But make a big thing of it when you've got focus on your department.
Yeah, just one more point. Can you go back to the dashboard slide?
Probably not the
Realize
fastest,
it's so
probably
far
not the
back.
fastest way to do this, but we're almost there.
That, so, in terms of communicating, benchmarking, analytics, it's really critical, like what something looks like. And this is, I mean, this is a good tool for really people understanding if it's a good or bad statistic, because sometimes people look at a bar and go, is that a negative bar or a positive bar? So how it's communicated, and this is sort of bringing in the communications team, and the visuals that are used, the analytics, which is combining the data and the analysis with the communication tool with the visual, is really fundamental and foundational in terms of getting that message out there clearly. And this type of tool is really good. You can see if you're in the red or if you're in the green. You know, and Linda and I have talked about this, you know, green, yellow, red. Real simple visual communication so that people understand the trend, and like, you know, a graph with all sorts of dots and comparisons to anonymous communities doesn't tell the story to the public. I know it tells the story to you guys. So just want to say, like, I like this graphic. I think, you know, being able to use something very visual and recognizable for people is important.
And so with that, I'm going to say thank you and wrap it up. Thank you very much, Ben.
Thanks, guys.
And we have one more agenda item. Snow clearing. Mr. Smith.
Yeah.
Okay, so today I'd like to speak about a few things. So Bob Smith, Director of Operations, Bob Smith, Director of Public Works. I've got Scott Lamont with me as well. Scott is our Supervisor of Roads and Drainage. And we're going to talk to you about snow and ice control today. So there's three primary issues that came forward after this season's Snowmageddon, or big snow event that we had. One of them is we received some feedback from our plowing and salting routes and methods that we used. We had a complaint from the airport, so those are two issues that we'd like to chat with you about. And then we'd also like to just kind of bounce off of you what our plans are for the 2017-2018 year for snow and ice control on the sidewalks, and how we plan to work that program. So we've got the map up here right now. I've also got, I don't know if it would help to have a map on the table.
These ones that are in the report?
Here's a big one. We've got a big one. But we do have to watch the mic.
Okay, I'll just say that.
We said we'd watch the mic.
Yeah, I might have to.
This is not for the public,
That's-
Kelsey, it's for,
Yeah, small, it's smaller.
Just think about the microphone.
Yeah.
we won't.
So what our objectives are this year is we've got this new machine is almost made it through the budget process. That's going to help us deal with trails and sidewalks. So what we've looked at is we've looked at our the safe routes to school and the active transportation plans, and we've come up with this route. It's the bright green route. We don't necessarily have to get into the details, and that was not my intention, is to get the red pens out here, but just to give council a bit of an overview on what we intend to do with our night shifts. So during a snow and ice control event, we hope to run this machine 24 hours a day or 16 hours a day, so we can maximize the use the use of this equipment. And we also want to try and address some of the issues that we found over the past couple of years, not just in the big snow year that we had, but also in previous years where we've had snow and ice complaints and issues. Where we'd like to try and get out ahead of the storm and potentially have these routes open by 8 a.m. That's our objective, is to have the routes to school done by 8 a.m. So this is our game plan, is that we will have the trail and sidewalk maintenance machine go out either at midnight or 8 p.m. and they'll be working diligently to open up these routes. So it's virtually every school in town. We've also done some work around downtown, so we get into downtown a little bit around the senior center. We're on Westway, so we can open up that route. So the idea is that we're going to work in conjunction with our night shift roads crew, so that we're taking the snow off of the roads and windrowing it onto the sidewalks, and then taking it off the sidewalks and putting it onto the boulevard. We've had some challenges where some of the homeowners and business owners and in front of the schools, where we'll take the snow, we have to open up the drainage, we put it on the sidewalk, and then the homeowners, business owners, they'll take it off the sidewalk and put it back on the road, and then we're kind of going back and forth with the snow. So hopefully we can deal with those issues by working in conjunction with our staff. Thanks, Ben. That makes it a lot clearer. So this is our objective. I wanted to just kind of get a feeling from council. When I went through some of the research prior to today's meeting in regards to our policy, we've been planning to update our policy for a while. It's a 2008 snow and ice policy. And our objective is to go through this for the 2017-2018 season, get a feel for if this works, and then revise our policies to reflect that. Some of the other issues that are in the snow and ice control policy now is they aren't reflecting the fact that we're using salt brine. That's another one of the tools that we're using in the fleet, so to speak, to help us with ice control specifically. So we want to do a bit of a revamp on the policy, but this would be the section that's not in your section about the roads specifically, but this is more so about the active transportation and the sidewalks. So I was just hoping to get a little bit of feedback to see if we're kind of on the right track here. And again, what we intend to do is to go back to the drawing board and come up with a policy for about this time next year.
Let me stop you there then.
Oh, no, I can go to the end, it's okay.
It's on this point, or
Well,
do you want to go to the end, or do you want to?
I can go to the end. I think we'll probably switch gears and go into the roads. This is kind of new. We're not doing this work now. This is new. And I was hoping to get a bit of feedback from council as we're proposing to make this ours.
Let's talk about sidewalks now. So Ted and then Patty.
Yeah, not in the downtown, and I see bylaws here, so I'm hoping that what we're planning down there is getting the store owners to do the sidewalks, so that we won't have to do them. But I'm kind of thinking about the new building on 4th Avenue there, just making sure, because there's going to be a lot of people over there. And, just making sure that we keep the main routes for pedestrians in the downtown. I'm hoping I'm going to hear a bylaw that's going to be looking after that. And safe routes to school, that was my big thing, and you're addressing that right off the bat, so that's great. But, mostly that's on this slide. I just noticed there was no yellow paint going to some of the areas in the downtown.
Just before I go to Patty, just so we're clear, so if you zoom out a little bit again, just so we've got it. So the highlighted green was the night shift, or was that just the sidewalk? Night shift. So in addition to that, the reds are, where are they in the priority list?
The red is the total inventory. So in this map, this is a sidewalk map. So red, I should have indicated that sooner, apologize for that. So the red is our total inventory and the green is our proposed routes for the night shift staff.
And what about the day shift?
Day shift is going to focus back on the trails, which is what we've been historically doing. So they'll get onto the trails first thing. We felt that the sidewalks were our top priority to get those school routes open and some of the business routes, and then we're going to get to the trails right after that.
Patty?
Yeah, a few things. I would like us to consider at least that sort of 2-block stretch from Pemberton to Victoria for the downtown. It's open for discussion, just on Cleveland, essentially. So just coming into that main business area, have a question about the pinch point coming down the corridor trail on the highway there. Can our new little skinny machine get through that pinch point, or?
I met, this is going to be probably about a month and a half ago when it was pretty messy there. I met with Highways and the contractor, and we're looking at options for us to widen that a little bit in there. So we're going to do a review with engineering of potentially moving those no-post barriers out just wide enough for us to get our machine through. We just need to get a topo pickup in there, and that'll happen shortly. We'll get that in front of Highways and the contractor to see if we can do that. That's our objective, is to have that ability.
And just trying to understand all this green route, which would be the new machine, what would be the average sort of cycle for that?
That we don't know. So there's some work that we need to do this summer. There's some letdowns that are going to need to be created. The machine is not great at jumping curbs, so we're going to have to look at some infrastructure work to do. Unfortunately, there's some power poles.
Disappointing.
Yeah, there's some power poles.
$1,000 that doesn't jump curbs?
Yeah, seriously.
We find all the power poles that are in the middle of sidewalks, the pinch points that you talked about. So our intention this summer is to do the work to be ready for the winter. And then once we're going to have a whole lot more information a year from now to be able to say, yeah, this worked. We had to get a plan out, and this was our kind of minimum. We may be able to do more. We hope that we can do
So
more.
this would be, you think you're going to be able to at least do this in the night shift?
Yes.
That shift.
And I concur with Councillor Pryor. I think that was a really good comment made about downtown. We debated that with the team, and if we go downtown, we'll leave a windrow that likely won't be the way that the store owners would like. There's a lot of potential conflict there as well. I think we're better off to have the store owners, and I think, let me speak to this as well, but I think in general, we've had some pretty good buy-in from downtown. It was, the link from the McDonald's to downtown, the link from, the schools, Westway, some of those places, that's more so where the challenges were, and that's where we want to focus our efforts.
Yeah,
Okay,
so,
then I'm gonna put myself on the list.
yeah, this last winter, because there was so much snow, I took to phoning store owners. And actually, I was surprised at how many people, like where the clock is, the guy goes, oh, well, I hired someone, he's an out-of-town guy, he hires someone every year to do his snow removal. He didn't have to do his sidewalks. So now they're doing the sidewalks. And the same with Mario's corner there. I bugged him and he started doing his, but from the brew pub all the way out to the highway, we shouldn't have to shovel snow. And the particular stretch from Mount Berger all the way out to the highway, Chevron owns a big stretch of property there, and they don't do their sidewalks. So I was hoping that we'd have some policy written up for this year so that by law can actually go after these guys. We can get a price per meter and hire subcontractors if we have to.
You're going back with this machine.
Yeah, well, we have a machine, but still. And like McDonald's, one of the biggest, richest companies we have in town, you saw their sidewalks, I'm sure. So people would come across the highway and go into a 4-foot wall of snow because the snow plows would just go through there and pile it up on the sidewalks. And so McDonald's would go, well, and I saw the police there a couple of times, but McDonald's should have to open up the crosswalk into their parking lot and then down at the far end from their parking lot back onto the sidewalk. Because, I understand how there's snow. But, it's just infuriating when you know that some of the store owners, the amount of money that they're making, and we don't even go after them, like Chevron. 14 years they've been sitting there with that fence around that property. They've never moved the snow, ever. Like, that to me is a major flaw.
Perfect segue into my comment. So, in the report, the highlighted page is the traffic bylaw, and it talks about the duty to clear ice and snow. And 4.12 says where ice or snow has accumulated on a sidewalk or footpath on or adjacent to real property used for residential or business purposes, etc., etc., etc. So there's a couple of things. So first of all, you can argue that a vacant lot is not being used for residential or business purposes, and therefore the obligation doesn't extend to in front of the vacant lot. Secondly, it doesn't say anything about in front of parks or public buildings or the library or churches, et cetera, et cetera. So when I read that, and this sort of applies to the downtown area, well, that applies district-wide, but my thought applies to the downtown area where we have things like parks and vacant lots and so forth, is maybe just create a snow clearing zone. And it's a legislative change that it might only be applicable to the downtown area. There might be other places in the community, but don't say it's just properties used for residential or business. Just say if you're in this area, you gotta clear the snow, whoever the owner of the property is. In some cases, that'll be us. But it might also be the school board, it might also be the hospital. There's other entities out there that we might want to place this obligation on. So I'll leave staff with that comment to think about amendments to that particular bylaw for snow clearing and whether you do it on certain specific areas. But it struck me that just looking at that, there's an awful lot of gaps in it. And I can remember going for lunch with the mayor and she was complaining about the snow in front of the park not being cleared, but the bylaw doesn't say we have to do that actually. So, and now there's big chunks of park that kind of interrupt all over the downtown area. I'll leave you with that.
I'll second that.
Good point.
Jeff, go ahead.
Sure. Thanks, Chair. Just to talk a little bit about the enforcement aspect, and I'll certainly invite Rick to jump in and clarify, correct anything that I might say. But certainly this year, in advance of the snow events bylaw, and Rick was bringing in the animal control folks, et cetera, to get out to meet with various commercial business owners, et cetera, to educate them about their responsibilities. But the revision of the policy that Bob's talking about is very timely, because I think written into that ought to be some obligations and what the enforcement picture ought to look like. And I know Rick is in the second draft of a comprehensive bylaw enforcement policy as well for council to debate that talks generally about our enforcement of bylaws. And the clearing of property owners' sidewalks does include a process for billing back to individuals. So when haven't looked comprehensively at what Bob has put on here, but if it is clearing of sidewalks that property owners have, we'll probably need to give some consideration to if we're clearing those for property owners, are we billing those people back? And if not, why aren't we providing that free service to other property owners, et cetera? And I think council can debate and clarify that so it's clear for everybody why we are and why we aren't. And very likely the safe route to school would be probably the rationale for that. But within that then is coming up with what will be the enforcement policy. And that will tie in with the revamping of our collections policy for the writing of tickets, etc. My understanding, just for a comparison's sake, is, and I'm not sure if it was the district or the city of North Vancouver, I just remember during one of the large snow events seeing an article that, because people will say, well, how many tickets have you written for this or that? And, they hadn't written tickets. It was really about trying to work for education, but at a certain point, ticketing is important. And I think in building in the policy will be new parking regulations and restrictions and so forth to help with this downtown area, because I know there were some challenges, and I may be getting ahead of myself a bit, Bob, so I apologize for that. But just to give a bit of context to council, and Rick, I don't know if there's anything you need to clarify on that.
Well, I don't think so. One of the significant changes for us this year was the messaging through the communications department. They really assisted us greatly. And before the snow events, during the snow events, and continuing through the snow events. So it gave people a lot of information. I know Bob, you created through, I believe it was communications, the little video, the snow plow going out, and all those things assisted us greatly. Speaking about downtown area, we're never going to get 100% compliance, but we really noticed a significant improvement this year over last year and the year before that as well. So still more work to be done, but I think we're headed in the right direction.
Patty and then Bob.
Yeah, just building on what the Chair was talking about, and reading sort of the language that's not in this bylaw, I don't necessarily want to wait for another snow season to make some of those little changes that Doug talked about. So are you going to put a motion forward that, like, I'd rather us redress that in the bylaw right away. I realize we're going to do a little more thorough analysis through next year and probably redo the bylaw completely, but that's a big miss within our bylaw, and I think we should tighten that language up sooner rather than later, at least certainly before next winter. It's not going to snow again, is it?
Forecasted for the end of the week.
Anyway, so I think we should tighten
Go
that
ahead.
language up quick. So I think, sure. I move that staff bring back amendments to the traffic bylaw in consideration of language around downtown snow removal zone, as well as specific reference to parks and empty lots. How did you want to phrase that?
Creating an area for snow removal.
Well, and safe routes to school. Gotta be in there.
And safe routes to go.
What?
Sure. Well, let's see, yeah. I think I didn't realize that it just says business and residential uses, and if you have an empty lot, even if it could be right in the middle of a residential area and break up a whole contiguous path, in theory, this bylaw allows it not to be cleared. So I think we need to create, even if you have an empty lot, that particular, I mean, if it's an empty lot in the middle of nowhere where there's no sidewalks, that's different, but
So the motion then is to direct staff to consider amendments to the traffic bylaw to expand the obligation for snow clearing to property owners in addition to business and residential uses. Is that covered?
that's why that's what I was looking to do. But that, yeah, essentially, yes.
So you got that? The mayor's motion? Is there a seconder? Any further discussion by council?
Yeah, well, when you're looking at this, I mean, like Patty said, if it's a lot out near the airport, I'm not gonna worry about it, but, particularly like from the seniors into downtown, nobody's plowed that sidewalk, right by the Scotia Bank on the corner right through. The bank didn't even do their corner. So, I don't know if we need words in there.
Well, they're already covered by the bylaw. It's the ones that.
No, but I'm just saying, we gotta make sure, it's okay to write it in, but we still have to have a way of making sure that they do that.
Further comment? Call the question, all in favor? Opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you. Carry on. Is that it for sidewalks? Just I'm trying to sort of compartmentalize a little bit, but.
Okay. My boss is saying yes, so I'll say yes.
You've got lots to cover.
We can bring that back. So the other two items, obviously, that came up, we had a complaint about our plowing and salting. I just wanted to make a couple of comments. We had some contractors help us out this year. Interestingly enough, all of the contractors that helped us out, we got complaints about them as well. So it's a bit of a trade-off. In regards specifically to the complaints around Kintyre, I think you've got the routes in your package there. The roads that were mentioned are not on our red routes. They get dealt with after the storm event. There can be windrows there that can be a bit challenging. We recognize that, but we've got to deal with those red routes and getting the drainage up. Yeah, this is going to be distracting.
Sorry.
So I think it's important to understand that we make sure that we maintain those red routes.
Why did you take the map away? Sorry.
Well, it was the sidewalks. It's not the red route. Sorry, that was
Oh,
mine.
okay,
Different map,
sidewalks.
yeah.
Okay.
That's my bad.
So I just wanted to make comment about that. Mr. Lalonde can kind of speak to the specifics on that particular complaint if you'd like, but that is our party line, is we really try and stick to those red routes to ensure that they get opened up, and we've got that access and that drainage dealt with.
Do you have that map up, the red routes of the highway? It's in our report, but it doesn't help the public.
Pull it up through the report.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just trying to look at Kintyre there.
So Kintyre is covered, the boulevard's covered, but it's the inside streets, Jura, Lomond, Montrose, Nairn, and Orkney that are not red routes. Those are all quite local. doing this, I mean, I will make the comment, from my perspective, the snow clearing in Squamish has always been very good. And I remember when I moved down here from Whistler, it was way better than Whistler was. That's 30 years ago now. Whistler's probably improved, but I've always been impressed with it. I'm sure there's going to be continual tweaking we can do. But there we are, that's the one. So on the right-hand side. So Kintyre itself is a red route, but it's the inside streets that are the local streets and side streets.
So as a reminder with our red routes, we've got an objective to get those all done in a 12-hour period, so that we can open things up for emergency service, for bus routes, so that people have at least one method to get to town. There are going to be flat areas and cul-de-sacs that will be left, and if it starts snowing again, as it did this year, and again and again and again, sometimes those delays can happen where we start at the beginning again and go back to the red routes. Mr. Lamont and I were chatting about one of the snow events where we basically just stayed on the hills for an entire 8-hour period. We got the hill open, we went to the next hill, to Skyline, got it open, and back to Highlands Way South. It was coming down that heavily, and there's different shades of red within these red routes. Brackendale is kind of a light pink, and Skyline and Highlands Way South are bright red, and these staff are amazing at what they do to make sure that those hills are safe and that we prioritize. And it may mean those flat routes don't get seen for it could be 3 or 4 days, depending on the snow event. The other thing that I really want to mention here too, we always talk about snow, it's easy to see, everybody knows it, but it's also the ice events that get us. We'll get 8 to 10 ice events for every one snow event, and people wake up in the morning, the roads are wet, and not have a clue about what night shift had done that night to make sure that they stayed open by applying either a brine or salt or a granular material. And that is definitely part of the challenge, that with kind of, just to circle back a little bit to the green route that we've got on the map there for the sidewalks, is that we would be dealing with that ice control as well. So I just wanted to throw that in as well.
Any other comments on the complaints of the red routes? Karen?
Is there a role for our fancy new equipment to play in just helping during the day? I know it's busy overnight trying to clear sidewalks, and it's going to try and keep the safe routes to school open during the day, but is there any role for it to play in sort of opening up some of those side streets behind the plow if we're having one of those crazy events where we just focus on the hills?
Our objective with that new piece of equipment is to have the safe routes to school open in the morning, and when we say open, that there would be a plow on them. If you take a look at the route, it's quite a long route, and it could be that we're there at 1 in the morning, and the kids show up at 8 a.m. There may still be snow there, depending on how the storm goes, and then to switch gears and get onto the trails. So they're going to be working those trails to ensure that we can get the cyclists and those routes open. If we start getting more of the separate bike lanes, we're going to be dedicated to that. So the chances of it getting onto the streets is going to be pretty slim.
Any other comment? Right.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at the red priority routes, I mean, they make a lot of sense, most of them. I'm assuming some of them that are on flatter land are on there because they're bus routes and that type of thing. And just looking at this, it really does seem the only place that's still on hills or that has sort of more tricky terrain is that one Kintyre subdivision. If we were to expand our red routes somehow, is that the next, would that be the next thing on the list to do? I mean, just Kirk, looking at it very quickly, everything else is mostly in the valley bottom, and so likely wouldn't make the list. I'm just trying to understand what would be the next priority.
Through Chair, our next priorities, unfortunately, are the new, well, I shouldn't say this, careful with my words, not unfortunately, but are a lot of the new developments in town. And the reason for that is that the new developments, the flat land's gone, so there's a lot of hills. Crumpet Woods is a very, very challenging area for us to maintain, and it takes a lot of resources. So as soon as we get one of those new developments, Sky Ridge will be the next one. As soon as we get those steep hillsides, we've got to get people there. And that would be certainly above and beyond the flatter routes in the highlands.
So it's currently not on, it's not even showing up as a subdivision, and I know some of those are strata roads in the Crumpet Woods development. Just, this isn't up to date, it looks like. There's no Crumpet Woods.
Crumpet Woods is all fee simple. So that's all, those are all.
Okay, it's just
roads.
not on your map that was presented in the,
Correct. I apologize for that. We've got a revised, that is a bit of an older map, but we.
so currently, some of that is currently on the red route.
Correct. I apologize for not having that on your map.
Susan?
You, I'm just looking at the map. Why wouldn't, I think this is actually a pretty good map, and I just get irritated when I hear about developments that are built up on hills that cost the taxpayer money and end up taking focus away from areas of higher density. We're focusing our density, a lot of it along Government Road, and ensuring that those routes are clear first before we go up into single-family home subdivisions would be my choice. Just because you build a subdivision up there, you've got to realize that if you're building a house on the hill, there's going to be challenges, and having to wait a little bit while we get denser areas and safe routes to school done first, which it seems like you've pretty much addressed it. So, but I just had to express irritation at building subdivisions that are on steep hills that take public infrastructure.
Oh, we zone them.
I know. True.
Cognizant of time, I want to leave a little time for this last subject, so maybe we can get on to that now.
Sure.
There was one more, there was the airport, I believe.
Sure, the airport. So this season, I have to apologize. We had a bit of a hiccup with our normal process. Myself and the supervisor were away, and what had happened is we had a complaint from the public that came through the connections route, which is our normal procedure, phone connections. The on-call person called the supervisor and left a message, and that got left until the following Monday. So I apologize for that. We've got a process in place that will fix that moving forward. With that being said, I just want to be very clear from a public works standpoint is that the airport is not a high priority for us, and I just want to get that in front of council so that they're aware. We ensure that those red routes are clear and that the drainage is clear, and once that's done for the community, then we consider the airport. We have in the past looked at contracting out that work. In my tenure here, through Mr. Plum, we have done one RFP, and we didn't get any bites on it. We didn't have anybody apply for that. Historically, what I've heard is that we have had contractors do the work out there. We have had some challenges with some rough handling of the airport and some of the aprons, so we have had some damages. I think originally that's how it came back to the district, and we struggled a bit with getting contractors out there. When we do the work, and again, if you want to get into the details, Mr. Lalonde is here for background, but typically we'll go out with a grader and a loader, so it's two significant pieces of equipment that are expensive, which would be, I think, challenging for a contractor to say leave out there. So I'm not quite sure where the direction is of council. We can certainly improve over the mistake that we made that one weekend, but I don't think we're ever going to get it to a top priority or first priority or 6 hours after the storm. It's going to be lower down until we get the town opened up is the service that we can provide. So I guess what I would suggest to council is maybe considering an RFP for bringing somebody else in, or accepting the standard of care that we have. We're open for input.
Patty, then Neil, and then Ted.
Yeah, the map doesn't show how far this red route goes up the valley, but it looks like it goes up certainly past the cemetery, so and then the map ends. How much time or how difficult would it be to, if this thing's going up to Government Road or however far up the red route goes, maybe it's to the dump, I'm not sure, then how much addition would it be to go in and clear the airport as part of that?
On the red route? It's 4 to 6 hours of time to do that, so it would take away from another part of the community.
The airport is 4 to 6 hours of clearing?
Yeah.
Because it's not just a plow, it's a plow and a dump truck, a loader and a dump truck.
Have to take it away.
No,
Yeah.
So while you're thinking about that, go to Neil and then Ted.
In addition to what Mr. Smith was saying, Mr. Lamont and I are in constant contact as well through the snow season. When there is a snow event coming or even forecasted, we will be in contact. We also, as the snow events occur, we monitor the snow. We don't plow typically until we know there's no snow in the forecast. So it's something that we are constantly in contact with. And the one particular weekend that we had an issue and some complaints beyond the usual was actually near the tail end of a very, very heavy event. And that one, as a second backup, I didn't reach out to Mr. Lamont at that point because I knew his crews had been going full tilt for days straight. So there is several ways that we approach this. This was an unusual year. Some of the tenants at the airport have expressed frustration. Other tenants have acknowledged they understand that the priorities of hitting the red routes. And so we're going to be engaging with the tenants there as well over the next few months about what any ideas they may have on that process. But this is the first year where we've found that this process that we've set up has been challenged to the degree it was, just based on the sheer volume of snow that we're getting in concentrated periods as well. So just want council to have that background as well.
Well, and I know there is exceptional years, but I do think that a lot of the little side streets and that should have the entrances cleaned out, And we should look at, I know you just mentioned contractors sending out an RFP, and maybe the airport guys would like to be in charge of their own snow clearing. Because some of those guys out there do have equipment and they would be cognizant of damage. I do think, like a lot of the side streets get plugged up when we go by at the plow. And, anybody that owned a backhoe or a bobcat, and I know they're all probably busy doing parking lots, but it'd be nice to get someone to clear those.
So just on the airport, who uses it? Is recreational flying, are there businesses at that time of the year during the snow season?
Yeah.
Is that the kind of business where you could put off flying for a couple of days, or is it, how important is the business, I guess is my question.
As again, this year was a bit unusual. The airport operators understand when snow is falling, they're not flying, and it may take a little bit of time for that runway to get cleared. We have Glacier Air, Sea to Sky Air, the primary operators there. The helicopter operations are not affected by it per se. And we have the Flying Club as well. And then the aspect of it too is we want to get it plowed in case it needs to be used for emergency purposes as well, right? So it's not like it's completely, forgotten, so to speak. But there are, it's a combination of commercial operators and the Flying Club operators.
Karen.
One thing I think of when looking at all this is that this was an exceptional year, and I'm not sure that we should be stepping up for exceptional. I think we have a really good plan, and it seems to work. I think the issue that I found with the airport is that we had this horrible storm for days and days and days, and then we had a bluebird day, and people wanted to fly. And I get that, but we were so far behind, we were behind, and that was the reality of it. And I think what we heard earlier in the conversation is that our communications team did a great job helping keep people informed, and I think we learned a lot from that, and I think that will go a long way. And the more real time we can make it, like I remember we talked last year about putting GPS on the plow so that people could figure out where they were. I still think that's something that we should strive for so that people get a sense of where our machines are on the route. I think if we're in a situation where our plows are just on the hills because it's sort of a life and safety thing, I think we use our Twitter account, we use our feed to let people know that's what's happening today. This is an exceptional event. And I think people are willing to forgive. I think people understand where they live and that we don't have endless amounts of money for plowing. But we learn every year if there's a way to, like Ted says, come back and open up some of those side streets. You just see all the people on Government Road just out there shoveling out their driveways and then shoveling out their driveways again. That happened to us a few times this winter, and that's just the reality of where we live, and this was a crazy year. I think the feedback we get from the community is important. If there's ways to try and ease the pain around Kintyre, I think we should try and do that in exceptional events. At the same time, sometimes there's just not anything more we can do aside from throw money at it, and I'm not sure that that's always the best solution.
So go to Patty, Robin, myself on the list, and then looking for final comments. I want to wrap this up within the next few minutes. Patty.
Yeah, so on that, there's a significant amount of money. I was talking with Colette at Sea Sky at Glacier Air, and, lost in the vicinity of $30,000 to $60,000. She hadn't calculated completely, but, so these are businesses and they rely on those good days because they're offset by a lot of bad days often. So if we can figure out a system whereby, I can see not putting it on the red route for the majority of the storm, but if there's, the weather is changing and we can, add a 4-hour loop to whatever and be a little more nimble in terms of our routing of our, I think we should be doing that. With regard to the GPS in our vehicles, everyone's got a phone. You're in a phone in a vehicle, maybe you just have one dedicated. GPS is in the vehicle and pretty inexpensive these days. I was talking to a guy, he said, we can set up an app for a couple $1,000. You can do your whole fleet for a couple $1,000. So I think we should be exploring those. Communications tools are so critical, and people know it's coming. They won't complain, or they will schedule to get out of their house at a different time or shovel their snow at a different time. I know this year people are like, I shoveled my driveway, and then Trail District came and 10 minutes later, well, if they can know that 10 minutes later the snow plow's coming and they should wait 10 minutes to shovel their driveway, then we relieve a lot of angst and efficiency in the community. So I'd like to get these apps so easy. We don't have to have a sophisticated GPS in the, you put a phone dedicated to a machine, the phone is transmitting the information. We can put it on our database. I bet someone would develop that pretty quickly. Anyway, I'd like to see that happen sooner rather than later.
Robin, Ted.
And I
Sorry,
just
Robin, me, Ted.
want to reiterate that there is a process for the airport operators to call and get plowed. It was our internal communications that broke down this time. So I hear what the mayor is saying about maybe looking at the forecast ahead, and I'm sure that we can look at that and see if it makes sense that if we're up in that area anyways, towards the end of an event, and that we know blue skies are coming, absolutely, we can always look at that and add it to the policy list. But typically what happens is when they know that they're going to be out and have a need for planes and operating, they call connections, they get on the list, and then the staff look at that as in order to prioritize the list, and they'll say, okay, well, planes are coming, of course. So have faith that there is a process for airport operators to get on the list, and that's by calling connections and Scott's team looking at it and actioning it where it needs to be fitting.
Yeah. And I am happy with the red list. I'm not happy with the idea of taking away from the red list for the airport. However, I recognize, and the mayor highlighted, there are businesses out there. There is economic loss. It's maybe a unique situation. Other businesses might not suffer in the same manner. So I don't mind going out for RFP again and looking at other alternatives. I recognize the challenges staff has in prioritizing these things during the middle of an event, but they're not flying that anyway. I think it's sort of the next moment after that when the snow stopped before anybody was really going to be using that. So I'm happy to either leave it with staff to prioritize, as Robin has just mentioned, or consider other alternatives like an RFP and see if there are other better alternatives out there, and if there is, and we can figure out a funding mechanism for it. Ted, last comment.
Okay, well, on the RFP, any airport I've ever seen looks after their own snow removal. So for RFP, and we're trying to save staff time. It's a 4 to 6 hour loop through the airport. I mean, who knows better than when they need the snow plow than the airport? And so if we're short-staffed in a snow event, why don't we just try to download that onto them, say, here, we'll let you guys look after your snow removal, and they might get someone close by, like Hunter or somebody like that that's got a grader that doesn't do snow plowing for the district, but would for them. And I just think it wouldn't be a problem to us if they were looking after it, and it would reduce the amount of work we have to do.
We're the airport. Randy?
It is a municipal. I think your staff did a fantastic job this winter. It was extenuating circumstance, winter, and considering what we went through and how much overtime your staff put into it, and really the nature of the calls and the complaints, 2 thumbs up, conveyed to your staff. We thank you wholeheartely. Fantastic job this winter. We're always learning from doing, and I just think it was a tough winter for everybody, and I think you guys did a great job.
Thank you, Mayor Henderson. Thanks for the trees, too.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to close off this particular item. Remaining on the agenda, status of recommendations to council. I am not the regular chair, as you know. I don't think there are any referrals from council. We can always email. Roundtable discussion. Already emailed. So I will look for a motion to terminate. Mayor, second Councilor Elliott, all in favor? Opposed, motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
So there's